A silent, invisible energy beam strikes without warning, leaving American spies battling brain damage while their own agency looks the other way.
It is a wild story.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a massive stack of sources. We have Inspector General reports, whistleblower complaints, medical records, and explosive investigations from 60 Minutes, The Insider, and ADN America. We are looking at the mystery of anomalous health incidents. You probably know it better as Havana Syndrome.
Right. And the allegations of a massive, coordinated government cover-up.
Now, before we jump in, our sources today do contain some politically charged content. They mention specific actions taken by both the Biden and Trump administrations. So we want to make it absolutely clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides or endorsing any political viewpoints.
Definitely not.
Our sole goal is to impartially report the facts, the statistics, and the ideas contained in this original source material. Okay, let's unpack this.
We have an immense amount of ground to cover today. But before we even look at the history of these attacks, we have to talk about what just dropped in the sources for 2024. Because this just blew my mind while reading through the document.
Completely nuts.
In 2024, Homeland Security undercover agents took $15 million in Pentagon funding. And they used that money to run a sting operation. They actually bought a miniaturized microwave weapon directly from a Russian criminal network.
Wait, let me get this straight. They didn't just find, blueprints or a manual. They literally bought the physical weapon off the black market.
Exactly. They bought the actual hardware. And the U.S. military took that stealth weapon into a laboratory and tested it on rats and sheep for over a year. The results were undeniable. The weapon caused physical brain injuries that are completely identical to the injuries seen in Havana Syndrome victims.
So they literally held the smoking gun.
Right. But despite holding the actual weapon and seeing the hard medical evidence from the animal testing, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence maintained as recently as 2025 that it's very unlikely a foreign adversary is responsible for these attacks.
You literally cannot make this up. We gave undercover agents $15 million. They bought a James Bond villain weapon from a criminal syndicate. They proved it causes these exact injuries, and the bureaucracy still put out a report saying, nah, very unlikely.
It is incredibly frustrating to read, and it goes so much deeper than just denial. Newly released whistleblower documents now reveal that the CIA allegedly lied to Congress, they lied to the FBI, they actively suppressed key witnesses, and they obstructed justice to hide the truth about these attacks.
Wow.
And just to add one more layer to this breaking news, the sources report that the Department of War is currently planning to weaken and dismantle the specific cross-functional team that successfully investigated these attacks in the first place.
That makes no sense.
We have the weapon, we have the medical proof, and we have an institution that actively refuses to acknowledge it.
We talk a lot about the geopolitical fallout of Havana Syndrome, but reading the medical files of these specific officers, it really shifts the perspective. We need to look at the actual human cost to understand what the bureaucracy is covering up here.
Yeah, this is not about diplomats getting regular headaches.
Exactly. Imagine being in a literal war zone. You are dodging real bullets, surviving explosions, and you feel totally fine. But then you wake up in a 5-star hotel room with the room spinning, your ears ringing, and your brain permanently altered.
It's terrifying.
Let's look at Mark Polymeropoulos. This is a guy who spent 26 years running elite counterterrorism operations in the Middle East and Afghanistan. He spent decades dodging actual bullets, only to have his career ended by an invisible pulse in a Moscow hotel room.
His case is heartbreaking, and it perfectly illustrates the bureaucratic nightmare these victims faced. In December 2017, Mark was in Moscow. He woke up in his hotel room in the middle of the night with severe vertigo.
The room was just spinning?
Spinning violently. And he had a splitting headache. He managed to get back to the United States, but his life was shattered. He endured 4 years of 24/7 chronic, debilitating pain.
In reading the sources, his own agency fought him every step of the way. He just asked to see a doctor, and they treated him like he was making it up or just suffering from stress.
Right. It took 4 years before Walter Reed National Military Medical Center finally admitted him. They diagnosed him with a traumatic brain injury. And the doctors at Walter Reed specifically noted his injury was caused by an external event.
So it wasn't stress.
No, it was a physical injury.
Mark's story is terrible, but he is just one of many. To really grasp the medical science behind this, we have to look at what investigators call the cornerstone cases. Let's talk about the Sam case from December 2020.
Yeah, the Sam case is the one that completely destroys the official narrative. Sam was a CIA deputy chief of station working in Central Asia. One night, he woke up feeling what he described as a buffeting subwoofer sensation in his head and chest.
Just a massive wave of pressure.
Exactly. His wife and his young son felt it at the exact same time in the same room. Sam immediately went to the embassy medical unit, and the doctors there ran blood tests.
Wait, if Sam just went in complaining about a headache and ringing ears, why would the medical unit even run blood tests? What were they looking for?
That is the crucial part of this case. They were specifically looking for biomarkers of physical brain trauma, and the tests revealed specific proteins leaking into his bloodstream.
Brain proteins.
Yes. Specifically, plasma neurofilament light chain and glial fibrillary acidic protein. We just call that GFAP. Under normal circumstances, these proteins stay inside your brain, but they bypass the blood-brain barrier and enter his blood.
Let's translate that for a second because it is so important for you listening to understand. Think of those GFA proteins as the physical 2x4s in drywall that hold your brain cells together.
That's a great way to put it.
The blood-brain barrier is supposed to be an absolute, impenetrable vault, keeping those building materials safely inside your head. So when doctors find those 2x4s floating around in Sam's bloodstream, it proves the vault was physically blown open.
Right.
You do not get that from a stressful day at the office. You get that from a massive physical shockwave.
That is a perfect way to describe it. To put the sheer force of this into perspective, Sam's biomarker levels were 3 standard deviations above the normal average. Clinicians usually only see that level of structural internal damage in combat soldiers who absorb the physical blast impact of a roadside bomb.
He absorbed the impact of a bomb, but without a single scratch on the outside of his body.
What's fascinating here is how this hard medical science completely contradicts the official government narrative. For years, the government kept suggesting this was just mass hysteria, or a psychosomatic issue, or literally crickets chirping.
Crickets. I still can't believe they said that.
But Dr. David Relman, a Stanford microbiologist, led an intelligence community expert panel to look at the actual science. His panel identified 4 core characteristics of these specific attacks. They found sudden vertigo, cognitive impairment, and a very strong sense of directionality.
Directionality meaning the victims felt the energy beam hitting them from a very specific direction, right? Like it was aimed at them through a specific window.
Exactly. You cannot fake structural proteins leaking from your brain. And you definitely do not get those proteins from mass hysteria. The science proves a targeted physical attack.
It is terrible for the victims, but from an institutional standpoint, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the CIA did not just ignore this, they actually launched an internal investigation. They created a special task force. But when you look at the whistleblower sources, you realize the investigation was actually designed to fail from day one.
It really was. The CIA created a unit called the Global Health Incident Cell, the GHIC, according to a direct CIA whistleblower named John Thorne, who actually worked inside this unit. The group existed primarily to make the Havana Syndrome issue disappear.
Wow.
The leadership explicitly told investigators their job was to disprove everything that came across their desks.
If your stated goal is to disprove a crime, you need a way to manipulate the evidence. And they used a massive statistical flaw to do it. How exactly did they rig the data?
They opened what they called a global data call. They basically sent out a message to anyone in the government saying, hey, report any unexplained illness you have.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Predictably, they pulled in about 1,500 random reports from all over the world. People reported everything from normal tension headaches to food poisoning to hearing bugs buzz in the jungle.
It is the classic needle in a haystack defense. If you want to hide 100 actual targeted attacks, you just dump 1,400 regular hangovers, migraines, and stomach bugs into the exact same spreadsheet.
Right.
Suddenly, the data looks like random noise. It is statistically brilliant and completely morally bankrupt. They successfully watered down the data to bury the roughly 100 genuine cornerstone cases like Mark and Sam under a mountain of useless noise.
That is exactly what they did. And to understand why a major intelligence agency would sabotage its own investigation, we have to look at the internal politics.
The swamp.
Exactly. Back in 2015, CIA Director John Brennan pushed a massive modernization plan. Historically, the CIA was run by field operatives, the people who go overseas, recruit spies, and risk their lives.
The tip of the spear.
Right. But the modernization plan flipped the power dynamic. It took desk analysts, the people who sit safely in Langley, read reports, and write briefs, and put them in charge of the field operatives.
You can easily see how that creates a disaster. You have people who have never worked in a hostile combat zone suddenly dictating terms to the officers actually taking fire.
It created an incredibly toxic dynamic inside the agency. The analysts who led the Global Health Incident Cell allegedly ignored all the operational evidence coming from the field. They essentially told the operations personnel to stand down. They ordered them to stop gathering evidence about the attacks on their own people.
There is a quote from the sources that perfectly captures the sheer madness of this culture clash. A former officer said, "It was like a police squad telling detectives not to go out and gather evidence for a cop killing."
And the culture inside that unit gets even darker. The sources highlight a truly disturbing detail. At one point, investigators in the GHIC actually planned a happy hour for the office.
I remember reading this. It's sickening.
During this party, they intended to drink and intentionally stagger around the room, actively mocking the stroke-like symptoms and the severe brain injuries of the victims.
They mocked the permanent brain injuries of their own colleagues. The elite operatives they were supposed to be protecting. It is staggering to think about that level of disrespect. And this toxic culture directly brings us to the massive fallout and the formal cover-up allegations we are seeing today.
The dam finally broke with a September 2024 report in Salon magazine. Multiple whistleblowers officially filed complaints with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. The charges are severe. They accuse the CIA and the National Intelligence Council of witness tampering, active suppression of evidence, and deliberately lying to policymakers in Congress.
The sources also state they hid evidence from the FBI, right? Why would the CIA hide this from the FBI?
Because the FBI was conducting its own parallel investigation into attacks on American soil. The whistleblower complaint states that classified documents proving the attacks were real were deliberately withheld from other federal agencies. They did this just to maintain the CIA's internal narrative that nothing was happening.
And a lot of this suppressed evidence points directly to Russia. We tend to think of Havana Syndrome starting in Cuba in 2016, but the sources show a much longer timeline. How far back does this technology actually go?
It goes back decades. Back in 1996, an NSA officer named Mike Beck traveled to a hostile country for a mission. During that trip, he suffered a suspected microwave attack. He later developed a rare, early-onset form of Parkinson's disease.
That's tragic.
For years, his case was a mystery. But in 2014, the NSA actually issued a formal confirmation. They admitted they held classified intelligence associating that specific hostile country with a high-powered microwave weapon, a weapon designed to bathe the target's living quarters in microwaves.
So the intelligence community knew this technology existed in 1996. They confirmed it in 2014. And yet, when people started getting hit in 2016, they acted like it was a complete mystery.
Exactly. Fast forward to today, and the modern investigations point specifically to a Russian military intelligence group known as GRU Unit 291555. This is a notorious unit. They specialize in bombings, poisonings, and assassinations across Europe. Independent investigations place members of this specific Russian unit in the exact cities where Americans were hit, at the exact times they were hit.
The timing is too perfect to be a coincidence. The sources mention a very specific sighting in Georgia, right?
Yes. In one highly documented case, the son of the unit's commander was spotted in Tbilisi, Georgia. This was on the very day an American officer was attacked there. The physical movements of this Russian unit track perfectly with the timeline of the global attacks.
Yet, despite the $15 million black market weapon, the blood tests, and the travel logs of Russian assassins, the official government stance remains very unlikely. And now we see an active political battleground forming over this evidence. The sources report the Department of War is currently dismantling the AHI cross-functional team. Why dismantle the one team that victims actually praised for doing honest investigative work?
According to multiple officials, the Department of War plans to reassign or fire the current staff of this cross-functional team and drastically reduce its bureaucratic power. Lawmakers and victims are aggressively sounding the alarm.
As they should.
One former CIA operations officer criticized the move heavily. He stated that political appointees are putting the swamp above the truth. They argued the government is ignoring a major national security threat simply to avoid a politically toxic public confrontation with Russia.
It creates a massive, glaring logical contradiction
is secretly
for
funding the government's
On one
massive
hand, the
spending
government
addiction.
passed the Havana Act.
Pretty shocking.
This act provides
realization when you
substantial
actually look at the
financial
math.
compensation
Right.
to these intelligence
imagine for a
officers for
second that
traumatic
you have a
brain
savings
injuries
account.
sustained in the line of duty.
And
The government is literally paying
you
them
swore to
out
your
for their
family,
permanent
hand over
injuries.
heart,
Right.
But on the other
that this
hand, the
money
government
was strictly for
simultaneously issues
fixing a leaking
reports
roof.
claiming foreign
You
attacks
said,
are very unlikely.
if we don't fix this
They are
roof,
writing checks for
the
a
house
war
is gonna
wound while
collapse.
publicly
It's an
denying the
existential
war even
crisis for the
exists.
house.
exactly,
It's
it's
pure
the Save the House
hypocrisy.
fund.
So,
But then,
what does
your
this
car
all
breaks
mean?
down,
Why
you
should
spend a little
you,
too much on
listening to
groceries,
this right
you've got
now,
bills piling up.
care about
So what do?
bureaucratic
You raid the roof
infighting and
fund.
statistical
You take
manipulation
that money,
at the
pay off your
CIA?
credit cards,
Because
and
this
tell
is
your
a story
family, hey,
about
don't
the
worry, we'll
basic
fix the
social
roof
contract
later.
between a
Right.
government
And in
the
this
people who risk
scenario,
their lives
the
to
roof
defend
is
it.
the planet.
Absolutely.
These
or at
victims
least
are the
Maryland's
absolute
climate
tip of the
goals.
spear.
And the
They
car
are
is
the
a
elite
massive
intelligence
self-inflicted
officers operating in the shadows to keep the country
$1.5
safe.
billion
If these
state
highly
budget
trained
deficit.
operatives
A completely
cannot get
avoidable
basic
deficit,
medical
I might
care
add.
or even
Welcome
basic
to the deep
honesty
dive.
from their own
Today we're
agency when
exploring
they're
a
injured on the
classic case
battlefield,
of fiscal
it
sleight
raises
of hand
serious,
coming out of
terrifying
Annapolis.
questions about
We are
institutional
looking
trust
at
and
the
national
Strategic
security.
Energy
If
Investment
the
Fund,
government will not protect
the
its top
SAFE.
spies, who
It's
will
a
it
huge
protect?
pot of money.
If we connect
meant to
this to
save
the
the
bigger
environment,
picture,
but it's turning into
it
a
exposes
hidden
a
tax
dangerous
on every
flaw
single
in how
person
massive
paying an
bureaucracy's
electricity bill
processed
in
truth.
Maryland.
It really is.
The
It's become the
intelligence
center of a
community
huge
constantly
political
demands
fight.
hard evidence
You've got
before
a
they
Democratic
act.
governor,
But look
frustrated
at the facts we laid
environmentalists
out
making
today.
some very awkward
Undercover
compromises,
agents
and
used
conservative critics who are
$15
rightly
million
calling this whole thing
to
a
buy
shell
the
game.
exact
A shell game.
miniaturized
And when you
microwave
look at the
weapon
documents
off
we
the
have
black
today,
market. Reports,
they tested it in
budget
a military
proposals,
lab.
critiques from
The
Senate
weapon
Republicans.
caused the
It
exact
is really
same
hard
brain
to unsee
injuries
it.
Our
seen in
mission
the
for this deep
victims.
dive is
The
simple.
proteins
Follow the
breached
money.
the blood-brain
Always
barrier.
follow
They
the money.
proved it.
We are
They
going to
literally
see
held
how
the
a
smoking
fund
gun in their
designed to
hands.
fight climate change
Yet the
is being used
bureaucracy
to plug
was so
holes in the
entrenched in
state
its own
budget.
defensive
And
narrative
we'll dig into the
so
argument that
focused
this
on
isn't found money at
self-preservation
all. This
that
is
it still
essentially a
refused to
backdoor
change its
tax
story.
on
They
families.
ignore the medical
Let's
science.
get right into
They
it.
silence the
The Field
Strategic
Operatives,
Energy
and they
Investment
ignored
Fund.
the actual
Sounds
weapon
very
itself
official,
just
to
to
protect their
protect
own prior
What does it actually
conclusions.
do?
Which
Well,
leaves us with one
on
final,
paper,
deeply
it is the
unsettling
state's
thought for you to
green
explore
piggy
on your
bank.
own.
The SIF
Think
is
about that
managed
stealth
by the
weapon for a
Maryland
second.
Energy
A
Administration.
$15 million
Its whole stated
concealable
purpose is to
microwave
reduce
device that
energy
shoots
bills,
invisible
cut
energy
waste,
beams
and
through
fund
solid drywall
renewable
and glass
energy.
to cause
Like solar
permanent
panels
brain
and
damage.
efficiency upgrades.
Exactly.
US agents
But here is the
successfully
real
bought it
aha
from a
moment of the
Russian
story.
criminal network. That means
Where
this
does the money
technology is not
actually
securely
come
locked
from?
away in a secret
Because they aren't just
state-run
taxing you
military
directly
vault.
for
It is
it.
already out there
No,
in
and
the
that's why
wild,
politicians
circulating on the
absolutely
open
love
black
it. It
market.
feels free.
If it is that
So about
easy for
40%
undercover
comes from
agents to
regional
buy one from
carbon
you,
auctions.
who else already owns one?
But the
And
big
what
chunk,
stops them
the
from
one
pointing
growing
it at
like
a
crazy,
civilian target
comes from something
next?
called